worst financial crisis since the Great Depression at least rolls on. One thing that's been missing from this whole cycle is the perp walk. Where are the arrests of the people who were responsible, or at least someone to throw to the wolves to make a scapegoat of? Professor Black, you were intimately involved in the S&L crisis. You're an expert on fraud. Why haven't we seen any arrests, really, of major players involved in the mortgage securities industry?
Because the FBI almost got it exactly right. The FBI has been testifying since September 2004 that there is a, quote, epidemic, unquote, of mortgage fraud in the nation. So they identified the problem, but then they decided to form a strategic alliance. And the strategic alliance they formed was with the Mortgage Bankers Association. But the FBI also reports that 80% of the mortgage fraud comes from the companies, the lenders. So they formed a strategic alliance with the leading group of perpetrators of mortgage fraud in the nation. And so they focused what we call retail, the smaller frauds, right, as opposed to wholesale, which is who are the massive lenders that are engaged in the enormous amount of fraud. And so they didn't even begin to investigate the large providers.
IndyMac, Countrywide,
all of those
Washington
folks,
Mutual.
Washington Mutual, they didn't even begin to investigate them until the market had already collapsed. That's 3 years after they warned.
So we'll talk about the specific frauds in a minute, but so where's the Spitzer of the year? I mean, as I recall, last time, well, it was pretty quick that somebody said, hey, this is a great opportunity to go out and find wrongdoing and really make a name as a very strong prosecutor. Where is he?
Unfortunately, the feds learned from Spitzer, and the Securities and Exchange Commission and the banking regulators, federal ones, hate Spitzer, always hated Spitzer because he showed them up. And so what they did was preempt the states and said you can't even regulate this matter. It takes enormous resources to go after the really big providers. You have to do undercover operations, and you have to do undercover operations primarily these lenders were in places like California. Well, the New York Attorney General can't do undercover operations in California.
Right. And Spitzer shot himself in the foot or some other body part. I mean, we have to put that out there. So what was the fraud? Was it liar loans? Because my understanding is those actually weren't illegal.
Well, making a loan isn't illegal, but making a loan knowingly with misrepresentations is illegal, and not revealing it in your public reports is securities fraud, and selling it to other parties without telling them about the fact that the loans will never be repaid, that's fraud.
And so this is, just to be totally specific, this is a big mortgage lender, not the individual saying, oh, I make whatever you need me to make, but the mortgage lender saying, well, if we are honest, it won't get approved internally and externally. We won't be able to sell it, so just fudge the documentation, package it up.
That's right. And destroy all our internal controls that would normally reveal the weaknesses. And that's happened in case after case in the major non-prime lenders. And that's why when people look, they find fraud incidents of 50% in the non-prime
So this was institutionalized at these companies, is what you're saying. Has that been proven? Is it possible to prove that? Or is it just sort of like one of the things like, well, yeah, you approved that loan, even though, we know it doesn't meet muster as opposed to, this is our official policy.
Well, it hasn't been proven in court for the reasons we just talked about.
Right.
They haven't done the investigations and they haven't brought the cases. Has it been shown? Well, yes, it's been shown because people have looked at the files. And even just looking at the files, this is no independent investigation. They find a fraud incidence of 50%. How else has it been shown? It's been shown in the failures of places like IndyMac, which weren't even on the troubled institution list. And then IndyMac cost more than twice the record cost of a failed depository institution.
And so how do you think this plays out over the next couple of years? Is this just a delay? Are we going to get the big white-collar prosecution? Or has the system just worked it out where, in fact, we're just not even going to get to that phase?
White-collar prosecutions under this administration are down 25%. They've systematically starved the FBI of resources. They took over 500 FBI agents out of white-collar cases, put them on national security, which you can understand, but then they refused to replace them. And so every year, well, to give you an example, we start about 500 investigations. when we get 50,000 new criminal referrals.
Right. Well, the SEC just spent 4 years investigating Mark Cuban. So is it possible the Obama administration comes in and puts the resources into these kind of investigations, and maybe a year or 2 years down the road, we will see these perp
The
walks?
public demand for this in the next
It's
couple
got to
of
be
years is gonna
humongous.
be
Right. Anthony Mazzillo is still
outraged.
out there with hundreds of millions of dollars, and I think, is the poster child.
Well, you might have thought that, but there is no poster child, is the point. Right? And there is no poster child because you need to investigate and you need to bring cases, and we haven't done either of those against the major players. We're starting to already run into problems with statute of limitations in some of these. So yes, one hopes that the Obama administration will make this a major priority, but it's so much easier to investigate while they're still making the loans and the operations are still open. And while the FBI can't infiltrate Al-Qaeda, it could certainly infiltrate WAMU, right? You don't even have to change the guy's resume. You just take the FBI agent and
most of them
put him
speak
in.
English, right?
They speak English, they speak accounting, and it all works just well.